Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome into another episode of Wiltfong Whiparound. Grace Remington here with our Director of Recruiting at 24/7 Sports, Steve Wiltfong. And let's get right into it, Steve. Starting in the Pac-12, a huge top 10 showdown between Oregon and UCLA. I, for one, am very happy this is an afternoon game, so I don't have to stay up late to watch this one, but lots of fireworks in this one. I feel like people's perception nationally of Oregon, all they remember is the Georgia game, but the Ducks have gone undefeated since then, putting up an average of 50 points a game. So recruits are in for a big show in this one. Who can we expect to see there in Eugene?
Well, Grace, we talked about it on past whip-arounds. There is no shame in getting beat by Georgia this year, as they are obviously on the short list for national title contenders. But credit to Dan Lanning and that Oregon coaching staff, that first-year staff out in Eugene to right the ship and get Oregon playing at a high level. Since then, Dan Lanning obviously helped put together that championship level roster at Georgia, the defending national champs. He knows what the recipe is, and he's trying to build it at Oregon. Oregon's got the number 12 recruiting class in the country right now. It's tops in the Pac-12, and they're hosting several touted recruits for this weekend showdown with UCLA. Several of these guys committed elsewhere. Grace, hearing 24/7 Sports Composite, five-star safety Peyton Bowen will be in Eugene. He's a prospect that's been steady in his communication with Oregon and has always wanted to visit. His younger brother, Eli Bowen, is also a touted recruit. So both expected on campus. Now, Peyton Bowen's a longtime commit to Notre Dame. Oklahoma and Texas A&M are two programs that have had a lot of smoke around his process, particularly as of late. But Oregon, another school trying to make a move with the difference maker on the back end. Jamari Johnson is an All-American athlete recruit from Inglewood High School that's committed to Louisville right now. He and former Arizona safety commit Justin Johnson are expected at Oregon this weekend as Oregon monitors Justin Johnson and continues to chop wood on Jamari. Wisconsin receiver commit Trek Kekahuna out of Bishop Gorman High in Las Vegas. He's having a fantastic senior year, leading Bishop Gorman in receiving yards and touchdowns, playing alongside the number one receiver in the country, Zachariah Branch, just to put into perspective how prolific he has been. He's expected at Oregon this weekend. Notre Dame running back commit Jaden Lamar is someone that's been talking to several Pac-12 schools. He's one. If he's in Eugene, I would not be surprised. There's going to be a loaded list of underclassmen, Grace, including receiver Chase Farrell out of Oaks Christian in California. I think Oregon's the one to beat for him at his point in his process. He can really run. Receiver's been a major priority for Oregon. They've really hit on it in this class here in 2023, but I think they want as much big playability as they can possibly get out there on the perimeter. Chase Farrell, he can fly, but Miles Jackson's a quarterback from California, 2024 kid. Aaron Butler, USC commit out of Calabasas, heard he could be there. So it's going to be a star-studded group of prospects in Eugene for this one. And Oregon, if they've gotten on a short list for a kid this cycle, they've been pretty formidable in some of these blue chip recruiting battles. When you look at their class and how they're trying to finish it, they're one that could be in the running, Grace, to have another top 10 haul out there in Eugene.
All right. And we got a ranked showdown between two undefeated ACC teams. One of them not really what we expected, but Syracuse. Orange Nation with some momentum on and off the field, coming off a win against a ranked NC State team, albeit without their starting quarterback. And then I was reading your article, Steve. It sounds like the recruiting trail, there's a lot of buzz there, but we're talking about Clemson here. Sounds like there's going to be two quarterbacks named DJ in Memorial Stadium. Obviously, one starting the game, the other could fill his shoes one day. But tell us about the visitor list at Memorial Stadium this weekend.
Yeah, the DJ you speak of is five-star quarterback DJ Lagway out of the Lone Star State. This is a return trip to the Clemson campus for him. He's been to Florida a few times, and there is some buzz around Florida, but he recently put out a top 10, and Clemson's in the thick of it. It's a school that really fits him from a cultural standpoint and really loves Dabo Sweeney and the presence he has on the program and the relationship that he's built with Coach Streeter and company. He's excited to get to Clemson and see their game day atmosphere and get back around the staff. And no question in my mind, Clemson's also near the top of his list. Clemson has the number 8 recruiting class in the country in 2023. They're going to be bringing in several key targets down the stretch for them. A couple defensive linemen, top 247 defensive lineman, Caden McDonald out of North Gwinnett High School in the state of Georgia. He's fresh off a really good official visit to Oklahoma. He had some strong officials to Michigan and Ohio State in September. In Florida, he took an official in the summer, returned for a game this fall. I know Florida's really turned it up on him as they try and add to what is one of the best defensive line classes in the country. But Clemson has been pushing hard for Caden McDonald for quite some time as well. They are the crystal ball favorite. I don't know if it's a crystal ball slam dunk, but Clemson's certainly one of his favorite schools coming into this visit. And Tamarian Parker on an official visit this weekend, fresh off being in Knoxville for Tennessee's big win over Alabama. Clemson is the crystal ball favorite for Tamarian Parker, but talking to Tamarian and his dad after the visit, sounds like he's looking at Tennessee. He always loved Tennessee, but perhaps looking at them at even a different light and lens. Good for Clemson to get him back to campus and get him loving back up on them as well. My son Kelly is a former Virginia Tech commit that at one point I think was close to committing to Clemson. He's expected on campus this weekend. Khalil Barnes is another safety that's on Clemson's radar. And then they really want to close this class with a running back. And Jordan Louis is a young man that they went and saw play earlier this season out of Meadow Creek High there in the Peach State, getting him on campus. He's currently committed to West Virginia, but Florida State's been kicking tires there. Georgia's brought him on a visit, and Clemson's been showing personal interest, and he is expected in Death Valley as well.
All right, it's whiteout week.
Is Clemson Death Valley or is LSU Death Valley?
Okay, I'm glad you say that because it's absolutely LSU. I was about to read into the history of that yesterday. I need to go finish that research. But have you been to both environments? Because I've only been to LSU.
So I have been inside the stadiums at both places, but not for ball games.
Oh, wow. You have to go to a night game in the real Death Valley. I'm telling you, my ears are ringing just thinking about it. I was there for it was the 2016 Florida LSU Hurricane game. That was during the day, but then I went to an Auburn LSU game at night, and it's just unreal. Glad we settled that.
Speaking of LSU, a little bonus nugget here. We didn't pre-plan it in the show, but they got Ole Miss in this weekend. That's another big game. And Wardell Mack and Wallace Foster are two top 247 in-state recruits that they love. And I'm going to crystal ball them to the Tigers today. I think that LSU has set the tone in those recruitments. And LSU is bringing back a lot of their commits for this game as they try and hold on to a top 10 recruiting class under Brian Kelly and company. And we'll be talking about LSU a lot in Death Valley when they bring in Alabama later in the season. That's going to be a massive recruiting weekend for the Bayou Bengals.
Yeah, and if they can knock off undefeated Ole Miss, a lot of people were picking them before the betting numbers even swung their way. So a lot of momentum there too. Let's go out to State College. It's whiteout week, one of their most important recruiting weekends of the year. And when you have an environment like that, that is why recruits choose to go to these schools. But the Nits trying to bounce back from that Michigan loss hosting Minnesota. Sounds like one of the biggest guys on the list here is the number 4 player in the country, 2024 5-star cornerback Ellis Robinson. So who else besides him can we expect to see in Happy Valley?
Yeah, Ellis is the headliner. He's a New Jersey native. He's very familiar with Penn State, James Franklin, and that staff, and has had Penn State high on his list for his entire process. I think Georgia's the one to beat there. Alabama, Miami, and Florida, a few other schools that have certainly excited him. Alabama in particular from that short list I just gave you. But he's always been fond of Penn State, excited to get up there and check out the whiteout. He's never been to a whiteout before, and we'll see if that's a needle mover for him in that recruitment. Penn State's got the number 13 class in the country in 2023. A lot of those guys will be back on campus soaking in that atmosphere. Joseph Mapoyi is an edge rusher from the DMV that I also think that Penn State is in great position for as they get him to campus. It's a loaded group of 2024s. Some names to highlight coming into this one, and Ryan Wingo. He's a 24/7 Sports composite 5-star receiver from St. Louis. He's made the rounds. He's taken a lot of visits this year, Grace, that would make any college football fan jealous. from Ohio State to Tennessee to Notre Dame to Kentucky to Texas A&M. He's been at some of the biggest games in college football this year. Penn State, he's built a good relationship with Coach Franklin and company, so he's excited to get out there and see them. Tyseer Denmark is a top 247 receiver from Pennsylvania that's going to announce his college decision in November. Penn State's on his short list, going to go to Tennessee next weekend, and then I think he's going to go into decision mode. Ohio State and Oregon are two other programs that have very much impressed Tyseer Denmark, who is closing in on his college decision.
All right, TCU hosting Kansas State this weekend, and TCU has taken the reins of the Big 12 after knocking off Oklahoma State. The Horned Frogs, the only undefeated team left in the Big 12, but it's not getting any easier for them because now they're facing their fourth straight ranked opponent. Who can we expect to see in Fort Worth?
Yeah, they'll have some of their key targets here down the stretch as they try and sign their first top 25 recruiting class in several cycles. Warren Robertson's a safety that I have crystal ball to TCU. Michael Harrison Pilot is a dynamic receiver prospect, expected back, who was there for the win over Oklahoma. Both of them were there for the win over Oklahoma. I like TCU for him as well. Enow Etta is a top 247 defensive lineman that's committed to Michigan right now. It tells me that he's going to be at TCU. Now, I think that's a long shot for TCU to flip, but hey, anytime you get a young man to campus, we'll see what happens. Marcus Deal is the coveted defensive line recruit from in-state that also was at the Oklahoma game. Georgia, he took an official visit to earlier this fall. He's a top 100 recruit. He would be a massive pickup for TCU. I'm looking the hardest at TCU, Georgia in that recruitment, but you got Arkansas, you got USC, you got Texas and Oklahoma, among others in that one. But that would be a big one if they could get him on campus. Got a story coming out later today, Thursday, on the big recruiting weekend that TCU just had for their big comeback win against Oklahoma State, where they had a lot of coveted offered 24s on campus. That will be, again, the same for this game as well. So TCU certainly having one of the biggest recruiting weekends in the country for this night game against Kansas State. And then the other guy I kind of forgot to mention there, currently committed to Utah, is a safety prospect that's having a great year that was supposed to be at TCU this past year, but they're working hard to flip him as well, is Randon Fontanetti. He's the jewel of Utah's class right now, a 4-star out of Freeport, Texas. Had some travel issues getting to TCU last week, expected at TCU this weekend for the night game. And the Horned Frogs have definitely, at the very least, piqued Randon's interest.
All right, let's talk about the number 2 player in the country for the 2024 class. Sounds like he has an announcement coming soon. He's a composite 5-star cornerback, Desmond Ricks. So what's the latest in his recruitment?
Yeah, I'm expecting some major developments with his recruitment this weekend. And a school that I'm keeping an eye on as he starts to really narrow down his lists is LSU. He was at LSU's win over Mississippi State. He was there in the summer, has a terrific relationship with Jordan Arcement, who offered him when he was in 8th grade when he was at Virginia, but has strong Louisiana ties and is now at LSU. He's built a really good relationship with Robert Steeples. He's been in contact with Brian Kelly. I think that when you look at Desmond Ricks' short list of schools and you see Florida on there, you see Alabama, you see Miami, those are all schools that I'm certainly not ignoring. And I've also heard the recent Gators buzz. But LSU, when you look at their secondary, Grace, you see nothing but guys that are playing their last year of college football. And I think opportunity to play early and be an impactful true freshman is very important to Desmond Ricks. And although I believe he has the talent to be instant impact anywhere he goes, LSU's need in the secondary is as big as any program that Desmond Ricks has on his short list. And so all of that combined, I feel good about LSU's position for Desmond Ricks at this point in his process.
All right. And I know it's been a busy time for you, Steve, because your Twitter feed is just blowing up. Sounds like we have a couple commitments coming toward the end of this week. Give us the details.
Yeah, 3 commitments that I want to highlight coming into this weekend. You have Chris Peel, who's a top 247 defensive back out of Providence Day School there in Charlotte, North Carolina. He's got Georgia on his short list, Michigan, NC State, and South Carolina. And I've long thought the Bulldogs were the program to beat for Chris Peele, who is a tremendous two-way player, a natural football player that can really run, that has a lot of upside in the secondary. I like where Georgia stands. Georgia has the number 2 class in the country. DB is one of the places that they're really trying to shore up here at the end of the class. They have some good ones in the fold already in A.J. Harris and Jonell Aguero. But Chris Peele would certainly be a nice addition. Daniel Harris and Justin Rhett also being in the fold for Georgia. But Chris Peele, I like the Bulldogs for him. You have Malachi Coleman out of Lincoln, Nebraska, Lincoln East High. He's a top 100 composite player, number 1 player in the state. I think Nebraska and the consistency with Mickey Joseph has put the Huskers in fantastic position to keep Malachi Coleman home. He's flirted with Ole Miss. He's flirted with Oklahoma, USC, Georgia, but Nebraska has by far and away been the program that's recruited him and coveted him the hardest. And so with that, I like their position. And Marvin Burks is a 4-star safety, 24/7 Sports Composite 4-star out of Cardinal Ritter Prep there in St. Louis. Ole Miss is my 24/7 Sports crystal ball forecast for Burks going into his announcement. Sam Carter and Chris Partridge have done an excellent job recruiting him. They got him back to campus this fall for a game after a June official visit. Now, I liked Ole Miss in the summer. I thought Missouri made it very interesting, if not took the lead late in the summer, early in the fall. So my crystal ball has gone Ole Miss, Mizzou, back to Ole Miss going into his announcement. And I think with Ole Miss, they view Marvin Burks Jr. as an instant impact type talent for them as they try and keep it rolling in Oxford.
All right, let's do some mailbag questions. Thank you to all of our listeners for sending them in. And like I always say, if we don't pick your question this week, keep on sending them in because we love answering your questions. Steve, let's start with a pretty big flip that happened this week. Mike Leach and Mississippi State poaching one from Billy Napier and the Gators, and that is 4-star athlete Creed Whittemore. First, I just have to say, when I saw he went to Buchholz High School, I was shocked because my first job in the industry was in Gainesville, Florida. So I covered that school during our Friday Night Lights. I personally want to know, how the heck do you flip a hometown kid? But this listener wants to know, how does Florida respond on the recruiting trail?
Well, receiver is a need for the Gators. I think kind of like we talked about in the Oregon segment when Billy Napier and this new staff got to Florida, they looked at it and said, we got to get more dynamic and elusive at the receiver position. So losing him is a blow because I love that pickup for him. I still like what they still have in the fold. Eugene Wilson out of Tampa Gaither, I think, is going to be instant impact type player, major game maker, ultimately one of the best receivers in the SEC. And then Andy Jean out of Miami there, Northwestern High, was one of the more coveted receivers in the country as well. That was a massive recruiting win for Florida. And they're in on some guys moving forward, and they'll certainly try and respond. Maybe get out the spatula on some guys. You have Jaden Hamilton nearby, who's really seen his recruitment take off as well. A teammate there at Buchholz, but we'll see. They got 2 good ones in the fold. I'm not necessarily exactly sure where they're going to go from here on that, but I do believe that I think that Florida's recruiting department is as organized as any in the country, and so I'm confident that they'll have a plan on where they're pivoting or what they're doing next.
Well, we've all seen that staff photo of all the guys Nate brought in, so I hope they're organized.
Hey, you'd be surprised. Manpower doesn't mean that they're getting done in an organized fashion.
That's fair.
Efficient.
All right. Our next listener question. You mentioned this guy earlier in the show, but does Michigan have a chance with Caden McDonald, or are they on the outside llooking in?
Well, I know he loved his visit, and Michigan has a lot of the things that he's looking for in a program. I wouldn't predict him to Michigan. I have Clemson in there. I think he really likes Oklahoma. But, hey, Michigan's on the short list, and I know he's thinking about him, and we'll see what happens coming out of this Clemson visit. He's going to announce his college decision on Halloween, so we'll know soon.
All right, next we're going to a 4-star edge. Where does Hunter Clegg stand with Stanford after his Utah visit?
Well, I talked to him this past week, and he loved his visit to Utah. Obviously, got a chance to spend some time with his brother on the field after Utah knocked off USC, and everyone rushed the field. And he loved that. Loves the coaches at Utah, and just loves where the program's at. I think that there's some confidence with people that spent time with him that Utah has a chance to add him to a class that's had a lot of their top targets there this weekend. And if they can hit big, they can ultimately finish with a top 20 class. But Hunter told me at the end of the interview he's solid to Stanford. So we'll see.
All right. And our last question. Everyone wants to know, is Miami back? Of course, that starts with recruiting. Their 2023 class ranks 11th right now with 17 commits, an average rating of 92.07. So they're right there on the edge. And this listener wants to know, do you think Miami will finish with a top 10 class?
Oh man, that's such a tough prediction. I think that they will be exciting. They will be one of the most exciting teams on the trail again in December or late November into December, when teams really shift their focus into crushing it on the recruiting trail. I don't think there's a head coach in the country that goes harder at recruiting than Mario Cristobal. They're obviously in on some elite guys. Samson Okunlola, offensive tackle from Thayer Academy up there in Massachusetts. Miami's a 24/7 Sports Cristobal favorite for him. Ruben Bain is a top 100 defensive lineman from Miami Central. If they're going to finish in the top 10, they have to have him. But that is a hellacious blue chip recruiting battle with some powerhouse programs like Alabama in the middle of it. And Damari Brown, Lauderdale American Heritage is another that they love as they battle Clemson and Florida State, among others, for him. Look, they have the targets on the board to finish in the top 10. Will they secure their verbal commitments and ultimately their signatures or their faxes or their whatever they send in on their phones to say we're 100% in? Time will tell, but we know they're going to be a team to follow all the way up to December 21 in the early signing period.
Yeah, I don't know if we're using the fax machines anymore. I feel like everyone tweets that on National Signing Day, but I don't know if they're actually in use. All right. Well, that's good stuff, as always, Steve. Thank you for your insight. And thank you to all of you for tuning in. Have a great game day, and we will see you back here on Monday.